And resuming debate, the honourable member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to stand in the House today and talk about C-34, which is the Liberals' attempt at increasing security on foreign investments in this country. And before I get underway, I'd like to announce that I'm going to share my time here this afternoon with the honourable member from Yellowhead. Well, this is an important issue in the country, and it's an important bill that we're facing here today, C-34. We cannot simply allow authoritarian regimes whose values and goals are fundamentally opposed to ours here in Canada to control important infrastructure or resources in this country. We must protect Canada's natural, economic, and security interests. So finally, after 8 years in power and 2 years after the Industry Committee presented this report on the issue, the government is finally trying to take action on this file. And I want to acknowledge the work done in the committee by both their initial study and in improving this legislation at committee stage. I think further improvements definitely can be made, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So the world, as we know, is changing every day. Quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, we all know this is a kind of a dangerous time right now. National security needs to be top priority, even though this government has decided to take $1 billion out of the National Defence Fund at this time. It's unreal that they would even think of doing such a thing. Internationally, we've seen conflicts almost sprouting up every month. You know, we have the Russian invasion, of course, of Ukraine as a perfect example of authoritarian dictator willing to do whatever he wants to get whatever he wants. And, you know, we look at the resources involved and ultimately how they will use violence to violate the sovereignty of their neighbors next door. And domestically, we are seeing what countries will do to increase their influence and control where they simply cannot invade. I talked about Russia and Beijing, for an example. These are actively interfering in our elections. We know that is a fact. Kenny Chu, who I sat with in the last parliament, isn't here because of the interference from Beijing. Foreign state-owned enterprises have acquired interest and control in many Canadian companies, intellectual property and other assets. They are gathering data daily on our citizens, and they are exploiting that data. Just today, Mr. Speaker, the front page of the national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, the headline, Huawei continues to file patents for research work done with Canadian universities after Ottawa's restrictions. It goes on to say the Chinese tech company Huawei is still seeking patents for research it conducted in partnership with publicly funded universities in Canada, almost 2 years after Ottawa began restricting funding for academics. In connection with foreign states considered national security risks, Huawei has filed patent applications for research on 5G wireless, artificial intelligence, which has been brought up in this House in the last hour, semiconductors, and the optical communications, done in collaboration with academics and investors at the University of Toronto. We've seen it at Queen's, University of BC, Western University, and also McMaster University. And all of those universities, they say, are fulfilling pre-existing contractual partnership agreements. But let's make no mistake, all the commercial rights to this property, which has been invented by Canadians and funded by Canadians, are now owned exclusively by Huawei. This is what we're talking about in C-34. And I have more to say on Huawei and their what they have done in my province of Saskatchewan. We'll come to that in a second. So the end goal, obviously, is to take over as much of Canada's economy as possible, to make us beholden to these foreign powers who have no interest at all in democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. We can see this happening all over this country, Mr. Speaker. We see Chinese state-owned enterprises buying up farms. They're buying up fisheries, mining, and elsewhere. Even in my province of Saskatchewan, when I drive around the province, you will see in the ditch, you want to sell land? Call 1-800. Well, you call that 1-800 number. It could be a third party. But indirectly, what's happening, somebody in Beijing or China wanting to buy Saskatchewan farmland. And Saskatchewan farmland, as we all know, has gone up considerably over the number of years because my province, we're proud of it, we want to feed the world. But this is what we're seeing in this country. Ditches everywhere. I mentioned Saskatchewan. I know I've been to Manitoba and Alberta and elsewhere. There are signs and ditches. You want to sell land, call 1-800. And when you do, you get a third party talking on behalf, probably of China or Beijing or other countries. We're in a situation where Canadians need to be able to trust that their parliament and their federal government are protecting them and their country. Unfortunately, I think this is another example of the Liberal government doing too late right now with the Bill C-34. This bill does not go far enough, Mr. Speaker, to address the risks faced by all Canadians, 40 billion of us, and given recent events, needs to be much stronger. I can recollect in 2021, the Industry Committee studied the Act, and they put out a report explaining how the Act could be improved. Clearly, the government mostly ignored that report because in C-34 only addressed 2 of the 9 recommendations that the committee put forward at that time. So let's fast forward to this year and the Industry Committee meeting once again. My Conservative colleagues were able to make some modification to the improvements of this bill and address some of the gaps, including important amendments that ensure a more rigorous review process of investments and acquisitions by foreign state-owned enterprises. Those amendments, Mr. Speaker, was to lower the threshold for national security reviews of foreign purchases by state-owned enterprises, make it mandatory for the minister to conduct a national security review when that threshold is met, and finally, create an automatic national security review whenever a company has been convicted of corruption charges. These were important and necessary improvements to this bill. I am very glad that the committee saw the common sense of these amendments and adopted them. However, the legislation still does not go far enough. The NDP Liberal government rejected amendments that would have further improved this legislation and properly and fully to protect Canadians. One of those rejected amendments, one I think is crucially important, would have modified the definition of a state-owned enterprise to cover companies or entities headquartered in an authoritarian state like China. I understand the potential concerns with such amendment. The nationality of the company should not usually be sufficient to label them a state-owned enterprise. And this is where I was going to get to Huawei and the reduction of the industry minister a couple of years ago not making a decision on Huawei. I think it's cost my province of Saskatchewan $200 million. They were invested into Huawei for G4 in the province of Saskatchewan. They were waiting for the Minister of Industry to make a decision on Huawei. It took him months and months. Finally, he makes the decision, but the province of Saskatchewan is into Huawei for over $200 million. So they had to put on the brakes and then reinvent themselves. So this has cost Saskatchewan and others, I think, in this country, millions of dollars. This is something I think that, our allies and the Five Allies alerted Canada long before the minister made the change, and this has cost Canadians a lot of money. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to make those points. I am concerned with Huawei as they are taking information from these 5 universities still today, when actually Huawei should be out of this country long ago. Thank you very much.